In 2012, a NASA-funded researcher at the University of Iowa named Jack Scudder observed a mysterious phenomenon. When the magnetic field of the Earth connected to the magnetic field of the Sun, a portal to the unknown was created between them. Scudder named these phenomenon X-points. Intrigued by Scudder's theory, NASA flew a robotic spacecraft into one of these magnetic holes. This probe revealed that the X-point had the potential to transport objects directly to the Sun's atmosphere, some 93 million miles away. As exciting as this discovery was, since it had the ability to change known physics and to open up possibilities on a better understanding of how our universe works, the scientific communities remained divided. And deeper probes of X-points have proved challenging. They are unstable, largely invisible, and their behavior is difficult to predict. But what if there are signposts that could help scientists locate X-points on demand? And is it possible these signposts were used thousands of years ago?
Among ancient traditions, there are many stories of places, physical locations on the Earth, where a human, under certain conditions, at certain times of the year and under certain cosmological conditions, can actually walk from this world into another world. They're called stargates. And the idea of a stargate right now is not as far-fetched as it might sound.
Stargates work through what we call the cosmic web. It is a connection between every star and every galaxy in the universe. As these planets rotate, they have nodes on a grid system on the planet, and you will have stargates that will appear when everything happens just right. A stargate will open up, and a person or a being is able to travel through that stargate, and then you enter the cosmic web and basically travel through the sun and through the universe through these electromagnetic filaments.
It appears that there are stargates that really work, and when so many different insiders all tell me the same stuff, I'm very compelled by that. We do now know that there are magnetic flux tubes connecting all of the different stars together. There's plasma that flows through that. We do know that Earth has this very strange relationship with the Sun, where approximately every 8 minutes there is a flux tube that forms, and that is actually when solar particle emissions from the Sun come to Earth. The solar particles don't always hit us. It's when this plasma tube opens up that we get all these streams and showers of particles, highly charged energetic material coming from the Sun. So the science is there. The science is very solid that stargates could very well exist, and that these other weird doorways carved into stone are living examples that we can still see of a forgotten technology that was one time a very useful part of those societies.
If these ancient depictions of stargates can be explained by modern-day science, is it possible they are in use today or were in use thousands of years ago?
A lot of these areas that the military will lock down basically are nodes in this cosmic web stargate system. These are places that the military want locked down because they don't want you to see what's coming and going through these gates.
Je pense que le territoire irakien comporte de nombreuses portes stellaires.
I believe there are many stellar gateways on the Iraqi territory. Gods could travel through stellar gates like the ones that we see in Stargate. I think this is the reason behind the problems that occur there.
Irak, parce qu'on sait très bien qu'aujourd'hui, malheureusement, toutes les recherches.
Indeed, we know very well that today, most archaeological studies all over Iraq have come to a halt.
Alors, une fois de plus, là, on sort un peu du contexte.
Maybe we could find something, the day when it is actually possible to conduct excavations again in Iraq. Once again, we are far from scientific proof. Why would the military, or even the Americans, focus on this particular spot? Are they using stellar portals?
J'en avais longuement discuté avec Jerry Zeitling.
I had a long conversation with Gary Zeitling about this before he passed.
Maintenant, on peut pas le prouver. Bon, maintenant, il faut savoir que Jerry...
There were things he knew that he didn't tell me. His wife had worked for the American Secret Services, and he worked on the SETI project for a long time. He also collaborated a little with NASA.
Mais le fait qu'ils se focalisent autant et qu'ils
But the fact that they got involved in and supported my work so much over several years makes me believe there is some truth to it, or at least that they had access to information which coincided with what I had translated.
Anton Park's research on the Sumerian cuneiforms not only attracted the attention of those in curious fields, but it also opened new doors at looking at older evidence.
The basis of our modern scholarship on Sumer comes out of the library of King Assurbanipal that was found in Nineveh. And in this area, there were metallic sheets that had patterns and little illustrations etched into them. And there are several illustrations.
In the Sumerian text, there are stories very, very similar of where advanced intelligences were able to move between dimensional realities, and they would do it using a small device that they were able to take and tune in a very precise way to the material of the earth, to the rocks of the earth, that would allow them to do this. So there are other stargates.
Is it possible that, like the ancient mathematical language encoded in the Great Pyramid, these shortcuts to other dimensions were created by the gods as a means to not only travel, but empower human beings to see beyond the veil?
They're beginning to discover that there are many other dimensions, and that these dimensions are only separated from ours by an electromagnetic membrane. In fact, he equates it to a radio frequency. We, as creatures, right now are tuned into this radio frequency. If we could reach in and just turn the dial a little bit, you're going to tune into the next one. And how horrifying might that be, or how beautiful might that be? We don't know really what's existing on those dimensions.
What we do know is in places like the Cairo Museum in Egypt, a number of artifacts have been found from sites such as Saqqara, for example, that scientists simply cannot explain. They're reluctant to even put them on view to the public. Some of them are in back rooms or they're boxed up in the lower levels. They're made of materials that are not from Earth. We don't know what this stuff is.
Could these materials of unearthly origin be proof that these gateways did exist?
Anything referred to as a gate of God or a navel of the earth is usually a sort of an energetic hotspot where the laws of physics are slightly different, or just so, that allows you to step through a portal into another level of existence.
There is one interpretation that would say perhaps there was something going on connecting different planets, different civilizations. And remember, the Sumerian accounts are of jealous gods, essentially, gods who are vying for influence and power.
Could mankind's ability to find these stargates be the next chapter in forwarding our understanding of the multidimensional universe we live in?
There's a stargate believed to be a similar doorway. It's in Turkey. There are others in Egypt. There are others in Iraq. And there are naturally occurring stargates in the American desert Southwest that the native people talk about.
Places like Göbekli Tepe, or certainly the area around Göbekli Tepe in southeast Turkey, the area around Giza in Egypt, and other places like Stonehenge in England. They form part of what might be described as an Earth grid, and that there were reasons for establishing these places. They all have something in common with each other. And if you ask me what that is, I would probably say that it's geomagnetic anomalies, the appearance of strange light phenomena, what we would call UFOs today, the manifestation of supernatural forms, supernatural entities, and the idea that you can achieve altered states of consciousness more easily at these places than elsewhere.
So there is an elaborate science that I have gone into for many years in which I was analyzing how it was possible that a stone monument could actually function as a portal generator. That in fact, it is the remnant of an advanced technology where even with something as simple as pure stone, if you understand that the earth is naturally giving off these bubbles that will allow you to portal out into other realities, then you have to know where to build the stones, and the stones actually become like a focusing mechanism that capture those bubbles coming up from the Earth's core that are multidimensional and allow you to travel through portals.
The question is, what are we dealing with? I think it's worth considering some extraordinary possibilities. Amongst them, which actually quantum physicists would not find so extraordinary, that we live in a multi-dimensional universe. That we're occupying one particular dimension of this universe, but there are many other dimensions which are normally inaccessible to us and inaccessible to our sensing, but that can be reached in certain ways. And perhaps the most direct gateway to the realm of the gods is found through the deliberate, targeted, well thought out alteration of consciousness. That seems to me perfectly plausible.
One of the most famous portals, the Bermuda Triangle, is a good representation of how planes and boats simply disappear into another dimension, never to return. Research on this area is quite extensive. But what about other seemingly non-active portals? What kind of physical elements could these hotspots possess that could empower humans or gods to tap into simulated universes?
In that frequency, what you need in order for that to really happen are quartz crystal deposits, very vast quartz crystal deposits. And it just so happens our planet has vast crystal deposits all around the globe. And that, to us, is showing us that this is an area with underlying quartz crystal deposits that are strong enough that they're causing tears in this membrane. And that's the reason why you get such a wide array of phenomenon, all occurring in a very small geographic area.
I think the stargates kind of represent places where the veil thins and that we're able to enter into contact with spirit on an easier level. Now, you can look at these as places within your own soul. You can also look at them as specific places on the earth. I think a lot of cathedrals and ancient monuments and stuff were built on ley line nexus points. So the energy of the earth is very strong in these locations. And also you get people conducting ritual and ceremony and whatnot over a long period of time. The etheric field of the place almost becomes a well-worn pathway back into Eden or the Tree of Life.
If indeed this is true, is there a physical place on Earth that mixes the mythological and science to possibly be the perfect gateway to the gods?
In Peru, near Lake Titicaca, is one of the most beautiful and profound examples of one of these stargates. The local people call it Hayomarca. Hayomarca is a mysterious doorway. It is literally a doorway that goes nowhere, carved into the side of a sandstone cliff near the Bolivian border, just outside of Lake Titicaca in Peru. It is on the Peruvian side.
In fact, the locals call it the Gate of the Gods. It's not something that opens. It's just a shape carved into solid rock. The fantasy is that the heroes at one time walked through this into the land of the gods. We don't see how it could open, but the idea of a stargate, that there is something that could step into some other dimension, or a wormhole would have some kind of starting point and could enter.
The idea of a doorway in general is something that we see a lot. We see these in the Egyptian temple walls, for example, where the initiate walks up to the temple wall, there's a doorway, and then there's a solid wall. So the physical body can go no further, and the physical body is left behind in the Egyptian traditions, and it is the energy body or the soul that moves through the doorway. What sets Hayamarka apart from those stargates that we see in places like Egypt is that it is believed to be a stargate where the physical body moves in its entirety through the door, in and out of the door, and that it is active today. The Quechuan people are the local native indigenous people from this part of the world, and they tell the story of when the explorers, the Spanish conquerors, came into South America, and when they came into the high Andes, and they tried to convert the local people to Catholicism and under Spanish rule, and the local indigenous people resisted. And they were chased across the Andes. And the last one, the last emperor, is said to have come to this place near the edge of Lake Titicaca and stepped up onto this stargate. And with a device that he held in his hand, he placed it into a notch that is in the wall. And when he turned it, he began walking, and he walked right through the wall.
Could this be the same device that the Sumerians are depicted using in earlier cuneiforms? If so, how did it work?
What the local people say today, they tell me, is that it is an active stargate. There are certain times of year that their ancestors continue to pass in and out. They continue to pass through this gate. Now, as a geologist, the most striking thing about the geology of Hayamarka is that it is a high quartz sandstone, and it's a very special kind of quartz called piezoelectric quartz. Now, if you have a watch that says it's a quartz watch, that is a piezoelectric crystal that is in the watch. By compressing that crystal with a spring just a little bit, it releases an electrical and a magnetic charge that drives the watch on a small scale. That principle applies on larger scales as well. We're looking at an area, a geographic area, that is under pressure releasing electricity the way that that spring and the little quartz would in our watch. And if there were a place where such a phenomenon could happen, the time travel and the ability to move between dimensions is directly linked to magnetic fields and electrical fields. So this place is already a high-stressed field because of the piezoelectricity. And mathematically, it makes perfect sense that under certain conditions, certain planetary alignments, when the magnetic field combines with that electrical field to produce an effect, that we could see something like a Stargate effect, just like we see in the laboratory. When we look at what has happened at Hayamarka and the principles that are involved there and parallels in other civilizations, it begins to tell a bigger story.
Greg Braden's research seems to parallel that of Jack Scudder's theory from NASA. For another researcher, Sonia Grace, she uses her extra-dimensional abilities to suggest that the gateway at Hayamarka could have been used by beings who came from the Pleiadian star system.
When I spirit traveled to the gateway to the gods in Peru, I found that we were way back in time. We got there at around 20,000 BC. This particular being that came to me, his name is Muon, and he is an ancient Pleiadian who told me that this is where they transported literally to their planet in Pleiades. The Pleiadians helped develop much of our societies throughout time, but particularly in this new phase of humanity, there was a group of Pleiadians that developed Tiwanaku in Bolivia and this place here in Peru. This place is referred to as the gods of the seven rays. They placed this ginormous door in place to protect this site from all of the things that were coming, and that would have included the fall of Atlantis and a huge civilization that developed much later.
If they were placed here on Earth to protect us, could these portals or gateways be closed, and can they be reopened?
Well, these temples and ritual centers were often used as places for ecstatic experience and places where we could travel out of the body, so to speak, and experience deeper levels of reality. Now, whether thinking of it as a physical teleportation, there may be something to that, but I see them as more of centers in which the soul could get into a deeper level of reality. And that's to me more what the Stargate represents. It's actually its manifestation. It's its presence within this world. So once you use that symbol correctly, you can use it as a doorway and as a gate to return to Eden, so to speak, or to commune or mediate with the spirit.
Originally, we all exist as beings of pure consciousness on a higher level of reality. And there are higher beings in this universe who are trying to help us do that. If you have an embassy of a country, that represents the territory of that country in a foreign land. So these sacred places that are scattered around the world are like embassies from that higher level of reality. And by taking shelter in those places, it becomes possible to get in touch with the energies that are coming down from those higher places. They may even be portals in which it's possible to transport oneself to those higher levels.
Is it possible that these portals may not transport us physically, but they would be able to transport us in a different way to another dimension?
I would not be able to back this up with evidence if I were to say there were a physical portal that transported us physically into other dimensions. But is there a portal that can lead our consciousness into other dimensions and to, in a non-physical state, to interact with the inhabitants of those dimensions? The curiosity is that you can go into shamanistic cultures today, for example, amongst South American Indians in the Amazon basin, who are using ayahuasca, and you can find that the shamans, after they have come back from the ayahuasca journey, recall the imagery that they experienced in the altered state of consciousness, and they paint that imagery. And lo and behold, the paintings contain the same elements to paintings that were done 33,000 years ago in Chauvet Cave in France. How do we explain this, and what can we learn from this? What those shamans in the Amazon tell us very clearly is that in the ayahuasca journey, they encounter teachers who teach them how to live and how to function in the world. So the question is, where were those teachers? Are they the inhabitants of other dimensions, of parallel dimensions that coexist? Are they perhaps aware of us when we're not aware of them? And were they finding some way to reach out to us and to teach us what we needed to know? That would be a true gateway of the gods that we're dealing with here. These are vehicles for crossing that space, physical vehicles for crossing the space between dimensions. Maybe that's what's going on here, and the technology allows consciousness to cross that space much more easily and allows humanity to learn the lessons that those denizens of other dimensions have to teach us.
Is it possible that portals have been created thousands of years ago to give us a gateway to not only other physical worlds, but our own self-awareness? As we learn to access these openings in certain places on Earth, could they connect us to parallel universes?
So all these hotspots are everywhere. Any ancient culture basically looked at the landscape and they knew where the energy was. We were so connected to the land back in the old days, we didn't have to build temples. You can just go walk about like an Aboriginal person does in Australia, and they'll say, there it is, it's over there. They'll just stand on that spot, they can see it, they can hear it, and you basically use your inner temple and you connect with the other world. When we lost the plot, we would then build our temples on top of those hotspots. That's how we have Gothic cathedrals, for example. They're built on top of ancient pagan sites, nothing very cynical at all. So the cathedrals are built to the same proportions as the ancient temples are built to the hotspots of energy. It's just the same construct, but they become much more physical and much more manly constructed as we go through history. And as we go through history, we lose more of the plot. So the more we lose the plot, the more we build temples in order to reconcile us with the natural world. It's a strange irony, isn't it? In fact, there's a very funny joke, and it's written on the temple walls of Edfu in Egypt, and it says, "We will keep building temples until people recognize they are the temple." So basically, they will look around and go, well, how are we doing as a humanity? Not too well. Okay, let's put up another temple.
These types of theories all point to these different contiguous realms that, because we are using these three-dimensional bodies which are programmed and adapted for this particular world, generally speaking, we are restricted to the perceptions and the operations in this world, and it's only after the consciousness leaves the body that it starts to experience, for the most part, that broader realm. When a person has an out-of-body experience, they continue to see their body, like the typical one in the hospital. They go out of the body, they still see the body, they still see the doctors, they still see the hospital, but then they're also seeing this light, they're also seeing these tunnels, or they may be seeing what they think are guardian angels coming in. And that's all part of the same picture, but it takes releasing from the body to be able to see those broader things that are just really, in some sense, part of us, but there's still a wall of separation. And so the Stargate, so to speak, might be that point where the gods and where these entities kind of come through, they go back and forth.
Could current military complexes, entities, and ancient gods have the understanding to use these stargates to travel to other dimensions? And if so, how does this knowledge help us understand what exists in our own reality and the use of portals to greater dimensions?
We search for portals. The spiritual, earnest seekers try to find such places. Scientists try to find patterns of energy that would suggest anomalies, possible openings. Because we're hoping to reach a place beyond our understanding. We have ordinary knowing. We have the physical world that we pass around in and can touch and navigate. Is there more? Yes, there is more. How do we get in touch with this greater dimension? Perhaps we pass through a door. The actual work to find something of a physical nature, that's another matter.
Could that other matter be entrances to another existence right below our feet?
What became of the gods? I'm not sure I can answer that question. Maybe that the survivors, the ones that could still be alive in our solar system, live underground on Earth.
Up next, could the gods still be among us, but in another reality, deep underground?